Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed watching those videos and it kind of put into perspective for you the difference between a feral child and an isolated child. In addition to that, you also want to think about how this process of a socialization is very much taken for granted and assumed to be a nature type of situation as opposed to a nurture type of situation. This should highlight for you those differences. So we're going to move on to socialization of the self and mind. And as I mentioned earlier, the idea of socialization, the question of how we come to see the self has been a question sociologists have been grappling with for a long time and have spent considerable amount of time considering thinking about doing research on. Especially in the early days of sociology, this was part of the academic thought. It's one of the main central concerns that people, sociologists, were trying to look at. So if we look at two early sociologists, Charles Horton Cooley and George Herbert Mead, their theories center on socialization of the self. And Charles Horton Cooley essentially said that we have what is called a looking glass self. And a looking glass self, from his perspective, could be described as you see yourself as others see you. So if you think about the way your parents see you or your friends see you or what people tell you, you're going to start to see yourself in that light and imagine how you appear to others, interpret their reactions, and use them to develop your own self-concept. So the example I like to give is a personal example of my own childhood. Now, I don't know if a few of you may have had a similar experience in getting to play Indians and Pilgrims for Thanksgiving, and then they would have the pilgrims dress up with the black hat and black shoes, and they would take tinfoil and make the big silver buckle, and everybody would get dressed up as a pilgrim, and the other half of the class would get dressed up as Indians, and you would take a brown grocery bag and put it around you, and you would make these fake feathers, and you would make a little headdress, and you would be pilgrims and Indians. And I remember year after year doing this type of stereotyped, really it's a stereotyped racist type of depiction of Native Americans. And I remember that I didn't want to wear the trash bag, the grocery bag anymore, and I wanted to be the pilgrim. I wanted to put the silver buckles on my shoes, and every year the teacher would make me be an Indian. And I remember specifically one year asking the teacher to be a pilgrim, and she told me, with my dark skin, I would make such a pretty Indian. And so again, that year I was an Indian. Looking back on it, I always assumed I had very dark skin. Obviously, you guys don't see me. You can see my little picture. But unless I really get a tan, I'm fairly light-skinned. And I remember going back and looking at these kind of, your class pictures where you're comparing yourself. You can see your little picture in second, third grade next to everybody else's. And I really was not dark-skinned. I was very fair-skinned. But in my mind, well into adulthood, I perceived myself as being dark-skinned, and it was because of how others told me I was dark-skinned, how dark I was, how I would, obviously I looked Indian, I looked Mexican, and that very much stuck with me. And it's a good representation of this idea of looking glass self. So if you can imagine, it doesn't have to actually coincide with the reality that of your skin or your height or your intelligence or even your behavior. Constantly telling a child that you're bad, Every time they do something that they shouldn't be doing that's inappropriate behavior, you tell them you're a bad boy or you're a bad girl, they're going to come to believe that they are bad, internally bad, and they're going to reflect that, and they're going to then grow up and believe that's who they are, and it becomes part of their self-concept. So hopefully you understand from those two definitions, because we're going to move on to George Herbert Mead. Now, George Herbert Mead is connected to the symbolic interactionist perspective. You might remember from the first set of lectures. And he brings to us this concept of the I and the me. And he looks at socialization of the self as he talks about it in terms of the significant others and generalized others. So we'll start there. So the significant others are the people who in your life you know. These are your your peers. So these are your peer groups. So people who are your friends or your family or in your job or workplace, these are the significant others. So these are individual other people within your peer group. The generalized other is slightly different. This is the proverbial they, right? So when you say they're going to, you'll hear a teenager say, they're going to talk about me. They're going to think I look stupid riding this bike, or they are going to, who that they is, there's no specific they. It's a very general they. So it's the societal they. It could be the community they, but you want to think on a very large scale. You want to think this person, this other group that doesn't actually, as individuals, you're not pinpointing. It's the idea of what they or the society in general will think about you if you don't wear pants to school, right? You might get individual reactions, but when you think about it, you're thinking the proverbial they. That's the generalized other. So what happens is that we start to understand these roles of the significant other and the generalized other from a very early age. So if you start with ages 0 to 3, your first interaction with the world is an interaction of tactile. So if you think about a baby is going to put everything in their mouth. They really are responding to, I'm hungry, I'm cold, I'm tired. When they're starting to discover the world, they're starting to discover it through putting it in their mouth, feeling it, seeing, touching, those types of things. So your first stages of finding out who you are is very tactile and very much in connection with just touching, feeling, hearing, those types of things. As we get a little bit older, into maybe the 2 to 3-year-old stage, we're able to take on the role of the individual other, of somebody who's close to us, but we don't necessarily understand their perspective. So at 2 or 3 years old, some of you may have had the experience where a 2-year-old can see that you're sick or you're unhappy or you're uncomfortable, and they will bring to you their favorite toy or their favorite treat to help make you feel better. So they know that you are different than them, but they don't understand that what makes you happy or what would make you feel better is different than what would make them feel better, because they can't take the role of the individual other from a perspective other than their own. As we get a little bit older, they start to develop the ability, you're talking 4 to 6 years old, of being able to take on this individual other. So now they're starting to be able to see that, and that's when you start to see them do the pretend game. So they're pretending to be mom, they're pretending to be dad, pretending to be baby, pretending to be a teacher. They're going to pretend always in this very kind of relatable fashion, right? People that they see. So they're taking on the role of the individual other. This is different than the significant other. At this stage, they still cannot take on the significant other or even the generalized other. It's out of their reach. So if you try to get 4 to 5-year-olds to play a game, an organized sport, it's not going to happen. If you've ever seen 4 and 5-year-olds play soccer, they look like a little beehive chasing the ball. They don't understand that they can have a position, and that position is related to the positions of everybody else on the team, and that's how they would make goals and win the game. It's not until you're about 7 or 8 years old that you start to develop that ability to do organized sports. That's your ability to take on the role of the significant other, so other people within your peer group, and you're able to see that you can have one position and other people have different positions, and that they can work together for a one set goal or an organized goal, right? Going beyond that, 8, 9, 10 years old, you're learning how to take the role of the generalized other. And this is, if you think about teenagers, extreme concern with the proverbial they, it's because it's their first insight into the generalized other, and they are very, very seriously concerned with what that generalized other thinks of them. It's not an individual other that they're concerned with, although they are, but it's more that generalized other or proverbial they. So you will hear them say, you know, they're going to talk about me, or I can't wear that, I'll look dumb, you know. Even if none of their friends are around, they're very, very overly concerned with that. And the reason why is because they're still developing their sense of self. They're becoming more who they are, but they're still trying to figure it out. And that new level of understanding has to do with the generalized other. So hopefully, knowing that you guys can't ask questions specifically on this, but you can always post them on the discussion board. I'm hoping that you understood and liked the examples, and we will stop here because this alone is a lot of information. We'll come back to talk about Jean Piaget's sensory motor stage, and that's actually really interesting as well. So see you in a minute.